altogether. Job is responding to his, I don't know if we should call him a good friend or not, his friend Eliphaz and his argument against him, and he's brought out some strong accusations and some pretty harsh criticisms of Job. And so in chapter 6, he appeals to his friends. Maybe you don't understand the difficult situation that I'm in. In chapter 7, he appeals to his God. And there is a great deal that we learn about Job here and how he feels and what his doctrine is. So let's start in verse 1, and we'll read down through verse 21 as we dig in this evening. Is there not an appointed time to man upon earth? Are not his days also like the days of an hireling? As a servant earnestly desireth the shadow, and as a hireling looketh for the reward of his work, so am I made to possess months of vanity, and wearisome nights are appointed to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise and the night be gone? And I am full of tossings to and fro until the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin is broken and become loathsome. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and are spent without hope. Oh, remember that my life is wind. Mine eye shall no more see good. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see me no more. Thine eyes are upon me, and I am not. As the cloud is consumed and vanisheth away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more. Therefore I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I a sea or a whale, that thou settest a watch over me? When I say, my bed shall comfort me, my couch shall ease my complaint, then thou scarest me with dreams, and terrifiest me through visions, so that my soul chooseth strangling and death rather than my bones. I loathe it, I would not live alway. Let me alone, for my days are vanity. What is man that thou shouldest magnify him, and that thou shouldest set thine heart upon him, and that thou shouldest visit him every morning, and try him every moment? How long wilt thou depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? I have sinned. What shall I do unto thee, O thou preserver of men? Why hast thou set me as a mark against thee, so that I am a burden to myself? And why dost thou not pardon my transgression, and take away mine iniquity? For now shall I sleep in the dust, and thou shalt seek me in the morning, but I shall not be. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, this morning as we look at this passage, we know that Job is in an extremely difficult situation. And we have looked already in the first couple of chapters at his loss of physical things, his wealth and his position and much of what he owns, and we've looked at the tremendous loss of life in his dear children. And then the attack on his health that has left him severely crippled up and having great difficulty. But in this chapter we see also that his suffering was not just limited to the physical. His suffering is limited to the spiritual, because he very much wants to hear from his God and know why. And yet it is one of those times when you are silent. Sometimes it is most difficult in the midst of testing. So some of the most comforting verses found in the Psalms and otherwhere throughout your word. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And Job is probably wondering here, are you still with him? Even in times when it doesn't seem like it, we know the truth. You are always with us, always accomplishing something good on our behalf and great for your honor and for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Job is really going through it, and in his response here to Eliphaz in these two chapters we see a great deal. But we're going to learn a great deal about him from his response to God. He starts off here in verse 1 and describes the futility of life. You start to read this chapter, and it reads very much like the book of Ecclesiastes, only on a rainy day. Ecclesiastes is like, I did this, and it was vanity and vexation of the spirit, and I did this, and it was emptiness, and I did this, and there was no... But you kind of have some hope for that guy, right? While he's writing, and you say, well, you got to experience this, and you got to experience this, and you got to experience this. Reading through this chapter is a whole lot like reading the book of Ecclesiastes on a rainy day. It's emptiness. I look around and all I see is emptiness. And it's not because I put myself to farming and it didn't fulfill me, or it's not because I built great cities and it didn't fulfill me. It's because of the continued sorrow and the continued difficulty and the continued problems that he's having. He uses two things here in the first verse to describe what this feels like. And the first one is warfare. Is there not an appointed time to man upon earth? This is an interesting way to try to explain this in the English, because the Hebrew word here for the appointed time to a man upon the earth is there not a time of warfare when men are gathered to battle? That's what the word means. There's one Greek word to describe this whole thing here. And it's a battle scene. That's what he's using in the poetry of this book. In other words, he's saying life is like warfare. There's hardship and there's difficulty, and you have to deal with the enemy. But even a warrior in the midst of warfare, whether he was volunteered for it or whether he was pressed into service, he looks forward to the time when it's over. Whenever that time is over and I'm discharged, then I get the benefits of the service that I put in. And so Job is saying, is there not a time of warfare to all man upon earth? There's that part of life, and you always look beyond that to, well, what's the benefit of it? And here's Job, and he's trying to look ahead, and he said, it's empty for me. I don't see that time of reward coming after dealing with the warfare of the sorrow. And the other one is a hireling, and it's the second half of verse 1, and then he goes on into verse 2 and describes it. And he says, are not his days also like the days of a hireling? Now, a hireling is a very specific Hebrew word. It stands for a day laborer, not somebody that was like a blacksmith or something like that. These are the folks that would be hired for a day and paid by the day. A good example of that, if you want to look it up, is Matthew chapter 20. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that went out to hire folks into his vineyard. And he sees some folks there, and he hires them, and he says, I will pay you a penny. And then he goes out later, and he sees more people, and he tells them that they can go work. And you look at that, and you say, well, there's a lot of unjustness there, because they all ended up with the same reward. But if you think about how he starts that passage off, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like. And so you have some folks that are saved really early, and they have a lot of time to serve the king. And the agreed upon reward is that you get to spend eternity in heaven. And then he goes out later and he finds some more people, and he says, you know what? You go work in my vineyard, you serve me for as long as you have, and I'll pay you what's right when you get done. And he does that multiple times. The last time, the folks only have about an hour to work, because that's what a hireling did. With whatever time they had to work, they were expecting a certain amount of reward, and they were very, very needful of it. A hireling lived very much day to day. Whatever money they made that day, they're stopping by the market on the way home and buying food, and that's their evening meal, and that helps them get through until they get paid the next night. And so in that particular thing, all of them get a penny. And the first ones are like, well, man, that isn't fair. I worked all day, and these guys only worked an hour. Why are they getting a penny? But the whole point of grace, and that's how we all get to heaven, is that the master says, I'm going to pay you what is, I am going to reward you appropriately. Well, Job here is going, where's my appropriate reward? I feel like I've been working out in the vineyard all day long, and I am very much in need of the payment at the end of the day. I'm very much in need of the refreshment. And look how he describes it in verse 2. As that servant earnestly desireth the shadow. You say, well, he's trying to get out of the hot sun. That's not what it's referring to. When do the shadows come? In the evening when the sun's going down. That's what he's looking forward to. He's looking forward to the end of the day because he's going to get paid and he gets to eat and rest. And that's what he is very much looking forward to, quitting time. Job is trying to tell his friends, but he's also making his complaint before the Lord. I feel like I've been laboring very faithfully in the vineyard, and now I am looking for the shadow because I would very much welcome death to come so that I can get my reward. And there's no reward for me here. And he's going to go on and on and on and say over and over and over again how his life now is empty. Job, quite literally, is looking at death as his reward for his hard labor and his warfare here on this earth. Now, Eliphaz has been throwing a lot of darts at him, accusing him of a lot of things, and Job is telling us, now hold on just a minute, because the way you view God, Eliphaz, and the way I view God are two completely different things. I view God as a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. I view God as a rewarder of someone who has been faithful in laboring for them. And I'm not questioning him. I'm not saying, boy, God made a mistake in allowing me to. That's not what he was trying to say in chapter 3. He was just saying it would have been better for me to go on to heaven earlier than to have to endure all of these things that I have had to endure. Verses 3 through 5. There's nothing to look forward to. So am I made to possess months of vanity, while the worker looks forward to the end of the workday. I am made to possess months of vanity, and wearisome nights are appointed to me. And again, here we have two very choice words that explain to us that he knows that God is in control of this. Because he has said, I am made to possess them. They are designed by God, and I have these empty days and these sleepless nights that are appointed unto me. And I don't know how many of them there are, but there is somebody who knows how many of these days and nights I'm going to have to endure. And so we see here a very in-depth look into a suffering man, and yet it has not rocked his doctrine. He still sees God the same way. He's just asking the questions like, how long and why? And I don't understand. Those are the things that keep popping up as Job is going through this. In verse 4, there's no looking forward to sleep. There's no rest. If you've been working hard, or even if you're suffering, if you're trying to heal from an injury, now you look forward to the times when your body can rest. And sleep is when you do the most healing and the most re-energizing. But his statement here is, when I lie down, I say, when shall I arise and the night be gone? How long before I get up? It's not, well, I fell asleep and I looked over at the moon dial and it says I still have 4 or 5 more hours to sleep. He's saying, I lay down, and the whole time I'm sitting there going, man, how many more hours before I get up? Because I can't get any rest. I can't sleep. So how long before I get up and continue the next day, which seems endless, but at the same time seems to be moving so swiftly. And he keeps sharing those two ideas as he goes through here. He is uncomfortable. I am full of tossings to and fro until the dawning of the day. If you ever had those nights that are sleepless because you just can't get comfortable? Something hurts or something aches, you're cramping, or you pulled a muscle, or sometimes you hurt something. They say you're going to have to sleep on your back. I can't sleep on my back. You're going to have to sleep on your side. My shoulder's falling asleep while I sleep on my side. You just it's miserable. And hurt my knee one time, and they told me to sleep on my back and put a pillow up under my knee. Man, that thing start aching. You're like, I got to take that pillow. You take the pillow out. It's killing me. And you stick the pillow. You try and move a little this way, and you try and move a little that way, and you would worry about bed sores, but that's not Job's case, because he's got sores head to toe. So bed sores are nothing to him, right? I mean, this poor guy cannot find a comfortable position all night long. And rather than sleeping and resting, he just looks forward to getting back up again. In verse 5, he is not looking forward to having his health back. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin is broken and become loathsome. Flesh is covered in worms and clods, infected all over. I mean, you can just imagine every single aspect of how miserable that would be without us going into any details or talking about it. But there's no aspect of day or night or any time where this poor guy is not uncomfortable. And covered with clods of dust, either the dust has created scabs over the sores, or you lay down to try and get some peace, or you sit down and you've got these open sores everywhere, and you sit in the dust with an open sore, and you know what happens. I mean, it's got to be absolutely uncomfortable, because sitting on one of those dust clouds would be painful enough, pushing on an open sore like that. That's what he's talking about. My skin is broken. That's a term of an ulcer. It's nasty in every way, shape, or form. So what he's saying is, you wouldn't be able to sleep if you were me either. He is talking about long sleepless nights with days of life that are filled with misery, and yet they seem to be fleeting. Notice that he used the term, it is appointed months of vanity. Now, the book of Job is very much absent time signatures that tell us when things are happening and how long things are happening. And you look at commentators, and some commentators say, well, this is one of the indications that this has been going on for months and months and months, but probably not a year, or he would have said years. Okay? Other commentators are looking at it and saying, have you ever been so miserable that one day felt like a month? Especially if you're not sleeping at night and you're just staying up, and it just seems like endless misery, and it's very difficult to mark time because there isn't a whole lot about your life that changes. Oh, I'm going to look forward to this, or I'm going to look forward. Job isn't looking forward to anything. It is just a difficult passing of time that seems to take forever and yet is so fleeting. He has a description here of the brevity of life in verses 6 through 10. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. You're sitting there putting that stuff through there, and they work that thing with their foot, and that thing's going whiz, 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 whiz. I mean, it's just booking, right? Making that thing. That's how he is describing the swiftness of it. In other words, he says there's no enjoyment. There aren't good days to break up the suffering. It's not like you can just say, man, I was so good for last Tuesday. It was great weather. I got a good night's rest. He says, it just seems like an endless whoosh, 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 whoosh of the weaver's beam as it's packing down whatever it is that God has designed for me, and it keeps getting closer and closer and closer to completion, and I feel like I'm getting close to the end of my life, and I'm running out of string here with nothing really to mark the days. And then he uses another analogy. It's like the wind. In verse 7, oh, remember that my life is wind. Mine eyes shall no more see good. Wind is something that is quick. You can't see it coming, you can't see it going, and it doesn't return. And you might feel another breath of wind, but what he's saying is, well, once the wind blows by, it's gone. And he says, when I die, you will not see me. My breath of wind, my shortness of my life will be over. And obviously, Job is so sick in chapter 6 and 7 that he thinks the end is near, and yet he's asking God over and over again, why does he seem to delay? Verses 8 through 10, death comes quickly. You look for someone one day, and they are gone. But look at how he describes this. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see me no more. Thine eyes are upon me, and I am not. As the cloud is consumed and vanisheth away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more. In other words, there's not the memorable moments that define life. I got to celebrate my birthday. Birthday to Job ain't going to be any big deal. He doesn't have birthdays of kids to celebrate. He doesn't have, it's just the marking of time without those wonderful things that happen that we take all our pictures of and we put on Facebook and we share with everybody that make life fulfilling and full. And Job is saying, when my breath of wind is gone, I don't have any more of these memorable moments. I just have the suffering and the misery. Short opportunity here in verse 11. Therefore I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Because life is short, what he's saying in verses 8 and 10, I will ask God now or forever hold my peace. That's what he's saying. And he uses these three descriptions of it. I will not smother my anguish, but I will let it vent. I'm not going to sit here, Eliphaz, and suffer in silence to make you happy. It would be intolerable for me. And so I am venting. And God knows what I'm saying, and he knows what's happening here. He understands the burden of my heart. And the last one I like very much. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. The word complain here means to commune with, to declare, to pray, to speak with. Now, so while the three friends are sitting there a little distance off and they're listening to him as he refutes, if you will, what Eliphaz told him earlier, he is talking to God and he's saying, out of the bitterness of my soul, God, I'm going to talk to you. Well, when I pray, I'm just going to pour my heart out to you because I expect that you will understand where I'm coming from. And it's almost a rebuke, if you will, to Eliphaz, because guess who doesn't expect where he's coming from? All of chapter 6. So he has turned in chapter 6 from rebuking Eliphaz for being an awful friend and some of the harsh things that he says to him. And here in chapter 7 he's saying, but you understand, right, God? I mean, you're the one that's always washing me, and you know how short my life is, and you know what's going on here. So rather than sit here and be quiet about it and try to suffer through that as well, I'm going to pour this out before you in my prayer. And then we get to verse 12. And verse 12 starts this section where he is seeking answers from a silent God. And this is where we really see the spiritual torment that is going on in Job. In verse 12, he asks his maker a question. And we don't get this or think of this, but I hope this is helpful to you. Am I a sea or a whale that thou settest a watch over me? Now, you look in some commentaries, and the words that are used here are also words that are used elsewhere of mythological creatures. I don't believe Job is talking about any mythological creatures, because the word that he's using for sea here is used throughout the Bible for that exact word, sea. And if you think about it, God over and over and over again, and he's going to do it when we get to the end of Job, he's going to say, where were you when I set the boundaries of the sea? When did God turn loose the boundaries of the sea? We call it starts with a F and ends with a Lud. Right? What happened to mankind? Wiped them out. Job is saying, I know that when you created, you set the boundaries for the water cycle, and you control the rain, and you keep and the waves are allowed to come up on the shore, but they're not allowed. I get that. And God's going to answer him when he gets to the end of the book, and he's going to use that very thing. Job, where were you when I did this? And Job here is saying, I understand that you are the creator. I know that you do this. My question is, am I a dangerous creature? Am I a dangerous part of creation that you need to use extreme power to rule and subdue me like you do the sea or like you do a whale? Now, I looked up whale. Whale in the Bible usually isn't talking about a whale. In fact, it usually just says great fish is how it's described. But this is an interesting Hebrew word because it's actually used three different ways. It is used as a whale, it's used of serpents, and it's used of dragons. And so any big dangerous beast sometimes is described with this word, and that's what he's talking about. If you were to turn loose these great big dangerous animals that you created, dinosaur. What if a rhinoceros went mad and went rampaging through a village? You know, God, I understand that you control these things. Do you have to control me in the same way? Is that what's going on here? Is what he is asking. Am I a dangerous creature or creation that you need to use this extreme power to subdue me? In verses 13 and on, he says, why are you disturbing me at night when I should get rest? When I say, my bed shall comfort me, my couch shall ease my complaint, then thou scarest me with dreams and terrifiest me through visions, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than my life or bones. Scared with dreams could be a lot of things. Nightmares, a delirium. He is not a healthy individual, right? Visions that terrify. Eliphaz had a vision, and my word, that thing's awful. And maybe he's saying, is this the kind of comfort that you're going to bring to me? When the other friends decide to speak, are they all going to share some crazy vision like this that's scary, not only in what it is, but in what they're implying in my life? He is not getting a lot of sleep. Is it the remembering of the terrible news, one after the other, that his possessions are gone, followed by the fact that his kids are gone? Is it blood poisoning or sepsis, because he's obviously a sick individual? But notice the extent that he mentions in verse 15. He's strangling or choking and having difficulty in breathing. That's what he is describing here. It feels like I'm smothering physically, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than my life. And his response to all this, I hate feeling this way. I hate the thought of living life this way. I do not want a long life if this is what life looks like. Now, notice again, all the way through the book of Job, Job has never talked about committing suicide. Not once. He understands that God is the giver of life. And he understands that there is appointed unto man once to die. Job is simply saying, God, I know you've appointed a time for me, but if we could hurry that time up, it would be wonderful, because I don't want to live a long life if this is how I have to live. I don't know how much more of this that I can take. And the description that he uses here, I would not live always, let me alone, for my days are vanity, empty, meaningless. That is the same word that is used 4 times in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, in introducing the book. Life apart from God is, 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 and guess what Job's feeling? He's sitting here going, man, I wish you'd say something. I wish you would show up on my behalf, because life apart from God is emptiness. It's meaningless. It's painful. It's hurting. Let me alone sounds like he is accusing God of something, and that's not what's happening here. There are two possible meanings to let me alone. Either he's saying, I know that you are the one that supports life, so please remove your supporting hand that sustains life and let me die. Or he's saying, please stop testing me because it doesn't seem like there's anything left to test. Both of them fit. Hard to tell which he's saying. Maybe he's saying both. Listen, just remove your supporting hand and let me die. That would be wonderful. Or stop with the testing because I don't know that there's anything else to test. Then he's going to ask another question here. Why are you spending so much time and attention on an insignificant man? What is man that thou shouldest magnify him, and that thou shouldest set thine heart upon him? Now this is interesting. Go to Psalms 8. Because Job is saying the same thing that Psalm 8 says. We know Job doesn't have Psalm 8 because David isn't here yet. But particularly Psalm 8 and verse 4. But to understand what David's saying here in the psalm, let's quickly look at the whole thing. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who hath set thy glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings hast thou ordained strength because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. Notice the mindset here. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, my response is, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? And he goes on and he says, even though you've made him lower than the angels, you've given him dominion over this incredible creation. And Psalmist here is going, I don't get it. You are so grand and glorious and magnified. Why do you even care about us? It is a miracle that you would care about a man when you are so grand and glorious. That's what David is saying in Psalm 8:4. You are so grand and glorious, it is amazing that you do anything good to men. Now, let's parody that because that's exactly what Job is saying. You are so grand and glorious, God, it is amazing that you would spend such time and effort in testing me. See what he's saying here? He's saying it's shocking to me that I am going through all of this, considering I'm just a man. It's like, why am I worthy of so much attention and so much time and so much effort that's going on here? Then you look at verse 18. He tells us some more about his doctrine. God sees everything and he knows everything. And that thou shouldest visit him every morning and try him every moment. The word visit is like an inspection tour that brings punishment. We see this in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, Exodus 32, 34, and 34:7, when it says, God will visit upon your children and your children's children. In other words, God is saying, you commit this, and I am going to see to it. There's an appointment of punishment that is going to happen on future generations because you forsook me and decided to do this. That's the same wording here. That's the same insinuation here. It's almost like God's coming down and personally making sure that this happens to me. In other words, this isn't an accident. This isn't just something that was randomly happening in Job's life. Job knows who is allowing this to happen. He just doesn't know why it's happening. And that's what he's struggling with here as he boils his way through this chapter. Daily, in the morning, Like a person waking up and you get ready to go out and start your farming and you check your chore. Okay, we got to feed this, we got to feed this, we got to hook up this equipment, we got to fuel this. These are the things that need to happen. Okay, now let's make them happen for the day. That's the description here. He's trying me every moment. Every moment is the same word as a wink. That small amount of time. And so in Job's opinion, every time that he winks, that little instant, God knows about it. He is always aware about it. He is always knowing about the most insignificant part of a day. How many times did you wink or blink today? Well, that question's like how many hairs are on the top of my head. A lot less than there used to be. But God knows, right? And that's Job's view of God. He knows all of those little insignificant moments, but it seems like every single one of them is an inspection to make sure that I'm suffering for some reason. And I wish I knew why. Verse 19. When will I get a break? I need a breather. That's what he says. How long will thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? Listen, if I could just get a breather long enough to swallow my spit, or maybe if I was healthy enough to swallow or spit. Either way fits. But he is having such a hard time, he feels like it is relentless persecution. It comes from an old idiom, I'm so busy I didn't have time to spit. That's what Job's saying. I am so caught up in the suffering, it is so involved every single aspect of my life, it doesn't even feel like I have time to spit. Are you going to give me a breather at any time? Do I get just a quick break so I can spit and then get back to it? If you had something nasty in your mouth, you'd want to spit it out. But notice how he closes the chapter here in verses 20 and 21. He says, why do you not forgive me? I have sinned, what shall I do unto thee, O thou preserver of men? Why hast thou set me as a mark against thee, so that I am a burden to myself? And why dost thou not pardon my transgression and take away mine iniquity? He does not confess any sin. Why? Because he can't think of any. He has already told the friends that. Now they keep saying, you're the reason, Job, that this has happened. There's some sin in your life. God is dealing with you because of sin. And in their doctrine, that's the only reason that God would deal with somebody is because of sin. The obvious answer, Job, is that he's correcting you. And Job's saying, well, if I have sinned, what shall I do unto you? In other words, I am willing to repent, but I don't know what the offense is. And in order to repent of something, you have to understand what you did wrong. That's what Job's saying. What is the offense that caused so much suffering? If Eliphaz is right, and that's what you're trying to do in my life, I don't understand because I'm not aware of any sin in my life. So what can I do to make it right? In the middle of the verse, he says, you have set me as a mark against thee. Why am I the target that you are always shooting at? I feel like I am a burden to you. Like you have to reprove me and reprove me and reprove me and reprove me, like mom chasing after a toddler that insists on doing something they're not supposed to. And I feel like I'm wearing you out while you are rebuking me. And I don't know what I have done. And he closes that verse, so that I am a burden to myself. I am a burden to myself. I get it. Now, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to think this way. I don't want to hurt this way. I'm tired of not being able to sleep. I'd love to be able to breathe normally and smell normally and look normally and have a normal life. Then verse 21. If I have sinned and you intend to pardon me, do it quickly, for I may not be alive in the morning. On one hand, over and over and over, Job says, boy, this seems like it's dragging on and on and on, and God, I wish you'd just let me go. And on the other hand, it seems like it's flying by, and Job thinks he's coming to the end of his life because it doesn't seem like he's got a lot of health left to fight with. And he wonders if he's going to be around much longer. As we close, a couple of notes to think about from this chapter. Job is not admitting sin because he can't think of any way that he sinned. And Bildad, when he begins to answer him, he's the next friend up in chapter 8, starts on the grounds that Job is justifying himself and not incriminating himself. So as Bildad is listening to chapter 7, he gets it. He understands that Job isn't saying, well, I know I've sinned somewhere, I just haven't confessed it yet. Not what's happening. God's going to say at the end, in all of this, Job sinned not. And all the way through this, Job is reaffirming things that he knows to be true about God, and he has not sinned in accusing God of anything that is not right. At the end of the book, God rebukes him for two things: speaking without knowledge and questioning divine justice. But he never rebukes him for sin. In fact, the opposite is true. He rebukes the three friends and then asks Job to pray for them. Think about that. We're going to go through chapter after chapter after chapter where these friends are going to take shots at Job. And when you get to the end of it, you want to really test the righteousness of an individual? Here is a guy who has made it all the way through. Now the testing stops, and God's going to say, you pray for forgiveness for those three friends. And Job's going to do what? He's going to pray for the forgiveness of his three friends. Because that's what true righteousness and godliness is. All right? So those are important things that we learn from this. But the last thing that we learn from this is the deepest suffering that we see of Job so far is here in chapter 7. And it's the silence of God. I started to count how many times he asked God a question. And then he waits for an answer, and guess what? There isn't one. And he asks another question, and he waits for an answer, and there isn't one. And over and over and over again, he's asking God, why this and why this? And I don't want to be a bother to you, and I know that you do, and I know that you do, and I feel like I'm coming to the end of my life, and what do I have to give? What do I have in meaningful life to give to you? And there's no answer. Which brings us to Hebrews chapter 11. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Trials of faith are the toughest. They're the toughest. Deep down at your core, what are you convinced about your God? Because Job's in the middle of it. And although he's asking some tough questions here in chapter 7, we obviously see he has a great view of God. He does. He's just one miserable human being. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the encouragement from a difficult book. It's hard to sit down and study and dig into a man who has been asked to give so much and go through so much. Yet when you are asking someone if someone has genuine faith, and genuine faith can be tested to the uttermost. And that's what we're going to see from Job, chapter after chapter after chapter. As friends and circumstances stack up and pile up against him, he does not ever give up on the faith of a faithful God. In Jesus'